Welcome everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, we're having a two-part show. The first part will be all about the complexities of the Latinx vote. Quite interesting to me, and I hope it's interesting to all of you as well. First off, I'd like to ask everyone that's in the audience to put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me, to make sure that you can hear me, and that would be most appreciated. Okay, so coming up first is Noemi Luan Perez. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. She has managed diversity, media, and strategic relationships across private and government sectors for over 25 years. With her firm Eco Diversity, she currently provides support to the National Park Foundation's Latino heritage cultural sites within our national parks. And she's got a lot to say about this topic, and we're so glad to have her. Let's see here. There she is.
I am so excited to be on here, and I'm giggling, and I think I hear Terry giggling in the background. Do I hear Terry?
Well, he's supposed to be here. He's not here just yet.
Okay.
He's going to be on the second half. But at any rate, Soror, I have to put that out there, that we are both members of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and I'm so glad to have you here this evening with me. So glad. So, Naomi, are you still under that tight deadline that we talked about earlier?
I have a little bit of wiggle room, but let's go at it.
Okay, all right.
Tonight, I have to start out by saying, if the last few days with Kanye West news hasn't taught us anything, it has taught us that we have a right to be all over the place, politically and of opinions. And I think that oftentimes the outside world looks at Latinos or Latinx communities the same way, like, what is going on? Why do they go against their best interests? What are their best interests? And it's such a complex conversation. At the same time, it's very simple. And let's start with Florida. And I know that today's conversation is Texas based, but let's start with Florida.
Whatever you want to talk about first. I had a question, but go for it.
Ana Navarro once stated it best, right? She's openly Republican. She considers herself a moderate Republican. And she speaks about her history and her experience as a Nicaraguan, immigrating to the U.S. in the 80s under Reagan policies, right? And so it's just part of that commitment and loyalty that she comes from to that political party and that political or particular frame of mind of the U.S., the Republican Party U.S. stepping in to protect communists or individuals from communism. The same applies to, obviously, famously, as we know, with Cuban Americans, with Venezuelans. Those two populations are large in Florida. And DeSantis is counting on their support right now. And if you look at their numbers, right, DeSantis is pretty much winning thanks to, or at least in the polls, leading thanks to Latinos in Florida. But the bottom line with those particular communities or ethnic groups, nationalities, however you choose to divide that pie, is that their affinity is to their home country. Right? That their affinity is tied to having left countries afflicted by communism, the variety layers involved with communism, and that thanks to the Republican Party, they've been able to leave their country, enter the U.S., live and enter to become Americans as refugees. And so they're loyal to the Republican Party. Texas,
is that what that is?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
but don't they see that so much of what they're talking about, they're against them? We're going to get into this some
But
more.
and we'll talk about it. Let me get this other one out about Texas. Interestingly enough, so Texas, there's hear me out. There is a group called the Texas Latino Conservation Voters. They recently did a poll on Texans, Texan Latinos specifically, to
Hmm.
identify, what trends, what is happening. Five key things I want you to pay attention to, and I'm leading to something, right, to help in sort of like the quixotic nature. The number one issue that they lean into is values. Oh, oh,
Values,
hold
yes.
on. Let me step back a little bit. Let's talk about identification. The number one identification they lean into is American, being American.
Okay.
Second one is being Christian.
Okay.
Third one is being Hispanic, Latino, whatever terminology they want to use. Third one. Do you hear me?
Mm. Yes.
So the fourth one is, values based identification.
Hmm.
Their ethnicity, race, national origins, all of that is fifth.
Hmm.
Fifth.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so what many non-Latinos see in terms of like why don't they see, or why don't these conservative Latinos see that many of these issues that they are for or against may not be in the best interest of the overall Latino community.
Yes.
They're only working from the frame of mind that they are leaning into the America
Hmm.
that has the values that they have as Christians, as the Americans that they want to be. And by the way, they happen to be Latinos and or of Mexican American origins, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
The ethnic piece is last.
Hmm.
It is last.
Hmm.
Now here's the other piece, and this goes back to the question you asked, right? Like what? But don't they see? At the end of the day, politicians, parties are going to drum up the issues that fodder, FODEER here, oh, FODDER, sorry, support from their stakeholders, right? So if it's communism, that's the word that's going to be, ramped up in the state of Florida, because that's what gets conservatives there, Latino conservatives, drummed up, right? In the state of Texas, if it's abortion, right, as a Christian value, that's what's going to be drummed up in Texas.
Hmm.
The other piece that gets drummed up, right, is the piece of immigration. That one is hard to rationalize, Pam,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
In the state of Texas, so Florida is again a more Cuban-based state, and they have touch points with Cuba. In fact, the oldest Latino heritage site in the state of Florida dates back over 400 years, and it
Hmm.
has connections to colonial Spain and Cuba.
Hmm.
Okay, but the immigration, the modern day immigration of Cuba, is really 40s, from the 40s and 50s, right? Let's look at Texas. Texas is also one of the oldest states in the union, where Latinos are concerned. Its heritage sites are, again, some of the oldest and first heritage sites in the nation. Texas was once Mexico.
Yes.
Um, we know the history of Texas, coming into the US, and we can say by and large, those Latinos, Hispanos, Hispanics, Tejanos, right, became Americans, those that existed during that time. And Texas has seen immigration from Mexico every day,
Yeah.
right, for the
Yeah.
past 400 years.
Well, the
Uh,
killer is it's really America invaded Mexico and not the other way around. I mean, we really want to be technical about things.
It's the narrative. Texas school
Mhm.
systems, what do they
Mhm.
teach? The
Mhm.
history that Texas school system teaches is very Tejano, Texas based, right? Texas
Mhm.
history really didn't begin until Texas became part of the Union. And
Mhm.
so those are part of the educational values that are espoused. When you are a Texan, you are Texas. Remember the Alamo, you are a republic. You are basically going to embody those ideals
Mhm.
um, as what it is to be American.
Mhm.
And so for the Tejanos in Texas and Texans overall, um, their value systems are exactly what they espouse, those 5 points, right? Being American, right? Being Christian, it is
Mhm.
part of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Um, the Hispano piece comes third, right? The values piece comes fourth, and the ethnicity piece comes fifth.
Let
So,
me ask you
yeah,
this. This is something that really I've been paying attention to with this particular group, with the Latinx. Do you think that the issue of colorism plays a part in the complexity? For instance, I've seen so
yes.
many surveys, Noemi, where the Hispanic people can label themselves white Hispanics, then Latin, and I'm like, I'm so confused. What's a white Hispanic? Because their skin is white, obviously. I mean, that's what, and the thing is they don't realize that no matter what color their skin is, their ethnicity does not make them one of the WASP people. You see what I'm
So
saying?
the
They
answer is,
wait.
I more than and I know you were going to wade into those waters. Um, at the end of the day, when you go to any of these countries in Latin America, whether it's Venezuela, Mexico, Cuba, you're
Mm-hmm,
going to find people of different races.
mm-hmm,
The
right.
majority of those people are a mix of anywhere in between, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, it is important to always remind ourselves, particularly in the U.S., right, that many of our Latin American countries and the value systems that we adopted from them follow a very different history. It's a
Mm-hmm.
Spanish history
Uh-huh.
um, that includes a different type of labeling.
Mm-hmm.
It also includes a different type of seeing one's own identity. Um, there was a great article the other day published by the NBC News on the World Series coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Astros and Phillies. And the point of the article was to point out that for the first time since, Jackie Robinson, there are no African Americans in the World Series, which no one had paid attention to that really.
Mm-hmm.
But there are Afro Latinos, there are
Mm-hmm.
Dominicans, there are Puerto Ricans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Many people in the audience were saying, well, Dominicans don't consider themselves black anyway. Puerto Ricans don't consider themselves black anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with respect to those particular players, neither here nor there, right? I
Mm-hmm.
actually don't know how they identify themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it is true that in Puerto Rico and in the Dominican Republic and many other Latin American countries, the identity is different, right? Whereas in
Yeah.
the US, it's very binary
It's
black,
very
white,
binary.
right?
We can't
Um,
understand, and we get offended when we see that they don't understand that just because you may be from another country or whatever, they see the color of your skin, period.
but to your point, and I'm going to get to your point. I'm not going to hide and run from it. To your point, since this data shows that the majority of Hispanic identified individuals do mark themselves as white,
Mm-hmm.
the same is true of Puerto Rico, right?
Yes.
Um, it is, you know, the one drop rule, right, that
Yes.
exists in the US doesn't exist in Latin American countries.
Yeah,
Um,
until they get treated like that. Like when Trump, when they had that horrible hurricane and Trump was throwing paper towel at them. Remember that?
so
Didn't give them
painful. Of
money.
course, I
Didn't,
remember.
I mean, I wish I could tell my Afro Latina brothers and sisters that it doesn't, I know how y'all feel or whatever, but do understand that when you're in America, this is the deal. This is the real 411. This is how you're no different than us in that regard.
I will share with you that I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. He's a Dominican American gentleman.
Uh-huh.
He published a piece where he really gave a comprehensive breakdown of the 13 identities that
Mhm.
Dominicans have, right? Which is
13.
actually right, which actually mirrors the Spanish caste system
Okay.
that existed in Mexico, right? So in Spanish culture, in traditional Spanish culture, you could be fit within 13 different identities.
Okay.
And it really came down to your level or your generational distance
Uh-huh.
from a particular race,
Uh-huh.
right? So the further you were from being indigenous generationally, you moved up the caste. Same with the further you were from being of African origins, you moved up the caste. Um, that is quite significant for a number of reasons, not just to point out that, again, there's 13 ways that a person can identify themselves, but notice that I said away and up, right? And so the goal is always historically to move away and up
Uh-huh.
from those original those origins, right? So the further removed you are from African, generation African or first generation indigenous, the
Right.
better you are.
Okay.
And I think that still carries through to this day.
Okay.
Certainly for those of you who live in Texas, and I'm waiting for Terry Allen to come on. But
I'm gonna bring Terry up right now. I'm gonna bring him up right now. This is the perfect segue because Terry and I were gonna talk about something else, but I'm gonna bring him up right now. Here
Terry is
he is.
based
Hey,
in
Terry.
Texas.
Yes, Terry is based in Texas. In fairness, I got to tell people who Terry is. He's the founder and CEO of 1016 Media. He is an award winning communications professional. He is chair of the National Association of Black Journalists Media Related Task Force, and I'm his co chair. Terry is well known for his PR skills and talents, and he is a native Texan. Terry is going to inform us of how things are going in the Lone Star State and some other things. But Noemi called Terry's name and she's talking about Texas. So Noemi, what did you want to tell Terry?
I will have to. It's basically more like a Terry, it's a yay or nay response, right? The differences between California-based Latinos, Texas-based Latinos, very stark. Even though those particular states both have large Mexican American communities, right? The way they see heritage is very different. The way they identify with Americanism is very different. The way they vote is very different. And in fact, we know that parts of Texas was going purple, right? Some of the more recent polls show that those parts that were going purple are once again moving red, right?
Oh God,
Um,
I can't take it. I cannot
Terry,
take
Terry, am I lying?
No, you're not. You're on point. I'm loving all of this. I just wanted to come in and throw some of that Texas history in there and get a high five from Naomi. I can say this: Texas stole Mexico's space. Now we've been indoctrinated with a false heroism from the Alamo to the Battle of San Jacinto, but Texas was annexed by the United States in 1845 and became a 28th state in 1836. But before that, Texas was Mexico, along
That's
with
right.
other
It
states.
was.
It was a Mexican territory, period. But we have, it's something I've taught people all the time, is that we've lost our cultural
And
memory.
We didn't lose our cultural memory. They just stole it.
Well, when you lose your memory, that's part of the theft. We've surrendered our understanding to another belief system by someone else. We've
Mhm.
let our names go. Knowing you were asking her about white Hispanics. These are people who have lost their
and I
memory.
have to point out,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
and I have to point out, the state of Texas legislature has, I don't know if it's been fully passed, I don't recall, but has attempted to legislate the type of history that can be taught in schools, similar to the state of Florida, right? And it's to basically legislate the narrative of what the memory is of history as it relates to that state, and how it is that identity is being taught to communities.
Right. And we call
So
the argument, but here it's called critical race theory. We're going to rewrite history, and then interesting because the word is his story, and we've got to understand when we're hearing someone else's story. And my favorite quote of all is, "What if we stopped and asked the lion what he thought of the hunter?" We always hear the hunter's version, but never the lion's version. And
right.
so we have got to be able to tell our narrative. But I'm moved by the power we have in voting, and I'm moved by a statement that Harriet Tubman said, Underground Railroad. She said they always asked her how could she move so many people with just herself, and she would pass out. And she said, I would have freed more slaves if they knew they were slaves. It's a history. It's a lost memory. And so at some point, we've got to restore that memory because we have allowed ourselves to let our cultural names go. We have a general loss of memory of how we got to where we are, and we've allowed false memories to take place. The battle for Mexico or Texas as a state was vicious, and it was undermining. But we don't have those stories. We have the heroic people in the Alamo and the great battle of San Jacinto. We've lost. It's a false memory. That's a false memory, Naomi. You know it.
And let me also point these things out. And part of the reason I wanted to pull Terry up, right? The state of Texas is significant in U.S. history where Latinos are concerned. In fact, President Biden just signed an executive order creating the newest national monument, which is a Latino heritage site in the state of Texas, the Blakewell School, right, which was the city's only school that taught Mexican Americans for almost 7 years. It's the segregated history, and it's about reminding and commemorating, preserving that history. The fact that Mexican American history included segregation, right? The state of Texas is also where the oldest Latino civil rights organization was founded, LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens. It is also the state where where legislation stemming or that constitutionally added Latinos or Hispanics as a protected category in the United States Constitution comes from, and that is from the case Hernandez versus the state of Texas. The state of Texas has, again, had a Latino history for several centuries. Yes, it does continue to have immigration, right? That's part of its reality being a border state. But it is the act of trying to control the history and the narrative, and trying to influence politics, right? To leverage Latinos themselves to vote in favor or fall under more what am I trying to say? Values-based issues, right? Over just cultural issues that is very
Right.
significant. And it's, and no, I'm not trying to throw the conversation into a different direction, but, I brought up Kanye earlier laughing, but I say that, and the reason I say that is that there is value in having national organizations, right? Advocacy organizations, leaders that help set the tone and or help us help narrate that story in the conversation. What you're seeing, in my opinion, in the Latino community is the absence of that, right? The absence of, a strong organization or strong leaders, the Cesar Chavez's of the world, right? That come forward and sort of help wrangle communities and say, we need to go this way. I think that so as long as some of our organizations like LULAC, which continues to have issues, by the way, it's in the middle of something major right now, and it's the oldest civil rights Latino organization.
I confess I've never heard
Unidos
of them.
US, which used to be the National Council of La Raza. Oh, very important. National Council of La Raza. It's been rebranded to Unidos US, and part of the reason it had to rebrand is because back about 15 years ago, they became targets of Republicans, right? Accusing the organization of basically trying to create a new race, La Raza, because La Raza was tied to the name. So it rebranded itself. And so the Latino community, time and time again, whether it's on the partisan side or on the civil rights side, is at the whim, if you will, of others' opinions, right? Other
Mhm.
than instead of being able to shape and narrate its own. Um, when it comes to immigration, and it continues to be an issue, but immigration as a topic still remains the number one issue of concern for Latinos in this election cycle. Well, the other reason it's important is that we're looking at the state of Florida, where more Dominicans have migrated into that state. A lot of Puerto Ricans who left, right? And let's remind ourselves, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. Puerto Ricans that have left Puerto Rico have migrated to Florida.
Mhm.
There is a possibility that in the future, those Dominican and Puerto Ricans will
Mhm.
outnumber Cubans and Venezuelans, right? And will eventually shift the tide, right? In
Mhm.
Texas and in California, the immigrant cycle has shifted where we're seeing much more Central Americans. We have seen
Yeah.
more Central Americans in the past 10, 20 years. And that
Right.
has also shifted how Mexican Americans see themselves as being control of the narrative. So those narratives are changing.
Mhm.
Immigration is a part and parcel to it. Um, but so as long as Latinos continue to give their power, right, of what their issues are to somebody else, we will continue to see that all over the place. Um,
Well,
opinions that you
that's what
see.
they're doing if they vote against their best interest in this election. I mean, really, because they don't give a flying rat's tail about them.
And yet, if you were to speak to conservative Latinos in Texas, which are largely Republican and outnumber the Democrats, they will tell you Christian values are in our best interests.
But here's the thing, those Christian values are turning into nationalist Christian values, very similarly to what we saw in with Hitler and that regime and stuff. So it's just so frustrating to me. I did have he is actually a pastor. He's written a whole book about this whole theory of reconciliation, and he talks about Christian nationalism, and now it's being said out loud by the Marjorie Taylor Greens and everybody else, and you think that it sounds like it's no Christianity that I was taught.
So and this can very well be a whole series in your conversation, Pam, and you do a great job with these political conversations. But the politics of misinformation,
Oh God, yeah.
because it is about narratives.
Mm-hmm.
It is about influencing public opinion
Mm-hmm.
and affecting behavior. Okay, I can tell you that around the country, particularly in Republican states, there are several paid ads that have been published, right,
Mm-hmm.
that are focused around misinformation. The misinformation being that if you vote for this particular party, you are voting or you're giving, the president the right to abort babies and whatever the case may be. Um, and these are paid advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, it's a common common issue and a common pattern. And
Mm-hmm.
every time there's an election with Latino audiences, they are done
Mm-hmm.
in Spanish language, right? So most of the world, unless you're a Spanish speaker, right, is not paying attention to ads. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really about capturing those ads and trying to, address them and deal with the misinformation. But the question is, right, whose values, who decides what the truth is, right?
Yeah.
um, and sort of how do you wrangle those truths together? And again,
Mm-hmm.
without those, those national voices, those national advocacy groups that help to wrangle the truths, right? It's We are going to continue to be all over the place. And again, I mentioned, the Kanye situation right now. um,
Mm-hmm.
promise I'm not trying to take you to a different place, but Kanye posted a picture of Emmett Till, his corpse,
When did
on
he
his
do?
on his Instagram page
What
today.
hasn't he?
Uh,
What hasn't
I'm
but
trying to ignore him.
you
Really.
Go
know,
ahead, Mary.
but it's really not to push the Emmett Till story. And the movie's out right now. It's
Yeah.
really to attach that image and that history of what happened to Emmett Till, which is one of the most egregious, miscarriages of justice in the U.S. in the United States history, to basically attach that, to him. Um, and many people agree and co-sign with that. So we're
Yeah.
always going to have community members in the Latino community, right, that are going to agree and co-sign with whatever it is, conservative parties or pundits are saying about, what is appropriate and what is Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So,
we have.
so Terry, let's get into you now about what were you going to say? You were going to say something, I
I,
think.
I am just pleased to be in this space with Naomi. That's one thing. And she's an amazing, brilliant mind. Thank you for connecting us. But I just want to piggyback on what he says, because sometimes we get caught up in the weeds and we just have to look at the system. And I'm going to tell you now, politics is playing on fears.
Mm-hmm.
Politics is playing on people's fears. Politics is playing on what if this happens to you? It's a fear tactic and it's an emotional draw. And so now they're being able to take that, and we forget the strategic placement of local officials who've been placed in places to make the rules. So
Right.
if we go after someone and then they go to court, well, that person in the court is an advocate of the person we're going after, so they'll throw it out. So we have so many things thrown out. Texas, the state has some of the most restrictive laws limiting a vote by mail in the country.
I was going to talk about all y'all stuff because y'all, Terry, are at the epicenter. Texas is the epicenter of all of this crap that's going on in the country. The vote, you guys were the first ones with the outlawing abortion with no restrictions, no matter what. You can't have an abortion. The mother her life could be in danger. You can't have an abortion. Let's see what else. Zero exceptions. It's the state with the most restrictive voting laws that you're about to say. Open carry of guns. You guys are number one in school mass shootings. Number one. And yet you've got that bill that just passed. You can be, 21 or whatever the age is, and you don't have to have any license. You don't have to have any training or nothing. You can just be the Wild Wild West. You guys are literally the Wild Wild West out there in Texas.
Yeah, it is a throwback to the old television story, Gunsmoke. We have taken away people's liberties. But we have to ask ourselves, and it's a deeper mindset, but you have to get into that mindset. Do we want a democracy where not everyone's voice is equally heard at the ballot box? So we have to protect the ballot. We have to protect the Black ballot, the Latinx ballot. We have to protect the ballot. We will be in a country where the truth is thrown out for lies, conspiracies, and fears. And that's what's happening at the polls here. I've never seen such an extreme large turnout in early voting in the history of Texas right now. And that puts the interests of extreme politicians above all others here in this state. So we've got to get turnout. It's not about talking points. It's not about values. It's about turnout. I refuse to sit on the sidelines, and I refuse to let anybody else sit on the sidelines, because we are here to cast decisive votes to protect our democracy, our rights, and our freedoms. And we have to do everything we can to fight for the vision of an equal America with equity that we aspired for even when we weren't included. And I remember a famous Texan, Barbara Jordan, says, I may not have been included in the Constitution, but by correction in law, I am as much as included as everyone else. And that was Barbara Jordan.
You know what, Terry? That just brought back such a beautiful memory. She was something else when she would get on that floor and speak. And you know who else I love from Texas, Terry? Was your governor. What was her name? Ann?
When I worked for Governor Ann Richards, yeah.
She cracked, she was hysterical. I loved her. Loved her. You know what? I wanted to one of our guests that we were supposed to have tonight was Mr. Abdul Dosunmu.
Mm-hmm.
He you had given me this wonderful video of his, and he told me, he said, make sure, Pam, when you play the video, that you emphasize that it is strictly for Texas. He was there in Dallas trying to tell people how to protect their vote. This gentleman that I have on my thumbnail, you guys, he is the founder of this organization called Young Black Voters, Young Black Lawyers, what is it, cooperative organization or something like that. YBLOC is the acronym. And I want to play for you guys the video right now that he gave us, because he wasn't able to make it to the stream tonight, so you can hear the work that he's doing, that they're really literally trying to protect the vote. And they're based out of DC, but he's going across the country. So hold on one second, I'm gonna play.
But they're actually headquartered here in Dallas, but they're national.
Hold on.
It's a grassroots network of young Black lawyers and law students who are using their knowledge to help safeguard Black voting rights.
Right.
It's called Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition.
Right. Thank you, Terry. Hold on one second, guys.
They did an awesome presentation during Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's hearing. It was called Pass Her the Gavel. And it was the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition launched Pass Her the Gavel to show the widespread support because of the way she was being abused in the questioning. And they're nonpartisan, they're a civic education organization, but they're a powerful group of young Black lawyers and law students working to protect the Black vote.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, I'm going to play his video now. Hold.
Hey everybody, my name is Abdul Dosunmu. I'm the founder and chief strategist of the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition, otherwise known as YBLOC, and we're here in Hamilton today educating our communities about the steps that they can take to protect their vote in this critical upcoming election. So I want to share 5 things that you can do to protect your right to vote in this election. The first is confirm your voter registration status before you vote. Know before you go. If you confirm your status before you go, if there is an issue, you have the opportunity to remedy that issue, rectify it. You don't want to be blindsided when you get to the polls. So go to vote.org and make sure that you confirm your voter registration status before you go. The second step I want you to take is make a plan to vote. Make a plan to vote. Know where you're going to vote, when you're going to vote, how you're going to vote, and what you need to do to make sure that you are able to vote on that date. And part of that plan needs to include voting early. However you're voting, whether you're voting by person, voting in person or by mail, make sure you vote early. The third step is if you are voting by mail, make sure that the ID number you include on your application for a ballot by mail and the carrier envelope for your completed ballot matches your voter registration record. And when in doubt, include both your Texas driver's license number and the last 4 digits of your social security number, just to be safe. The next step is, if you're voting in person, we want to make sure that you take an approved form of ID with you to the polls and that you know your rights. If you do not have an approved form of ID, make sure you ask for a reasonable impediment declaration form to provide supporting documentation that will allow you to vote a regular ballot. But we want you to make sure that you are ready for the voter ID requirement if you're voting in person, and that you know your rights. You have the right to vote free from intimidation. You have the right to vote if you're in line by the time the polls close. You have the right to vote curbside if you are a voter with a physical disability. So we want you to make sure that you know your rights. And then finally, make sure you remember this number. Write it down, put it in your phone, 866-687-8683. That is the number to the Election Protection Hotline. There are lawyers on that hotline who are able to assist you with any questions or concerns you have or any challenges you experience while voting. 866-687-8683. I'm Abdul Dasumu with the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition, and we just want to make sure that you are able to successfully vote in this election because our vote is our power. Black ballots are Black futures. We want to make sure that we protect our ballots and our future.
Amazing.
He's awesome.
Let me add to that, Pam. When he says, he throws those words out there, reasonable impediment identification form from Texas. That means if you don't have what they're asking for, you can ask the voter to provide a copy or original one of the following forms: a certified domestic U.S. state or territory birth certificate, or document confirming birth admissible in a court of law, a current utility bill, a bank statement, a government check, a paycheck, or a government document that shows the voter's name and address, which includes the voter's registration certificate. So that is called a declaration of reasonable impediment. It indicates that I am who I am and I can sign my name to a ballot.
Right, right. Oh, Terry, I mean, the fact that he had all of that information to just to vote. I mean, we almost are back to the days of how many marbles are in the jar. You know, not too far away.
So we're back to those poll taxes and can you spell this and all the things that were put in place to suppress the vote. And I vote lawmakers are trying to prevent the rising Texas electorate from becoming democratic and exercising a fundamental right to vote. Even in Harris County, they filed 2 lawsuits over a Senate bill, arguing that you can't rewrite, you can't declare the winner because you didn't like the outcome of the election. Okay, and that's
you know that's one of the big tricks that we're about to deal with, because Carrie Lake, once a very esteemed journalist, once upon a time, before she drank the Kool-Aid, she's saying now, well, if I don't win, she's not saying it directly, but like, I'll accept whatever happens as long as it was a fair and free election. They're already sowing those seeds of doubt like Trump did, to use that as an excuse to saying that, oh, you lied, you cheated, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pam.
And I was seeing that Ann Bush says, vote as if Obama is on the ballot. You guys need to go out like Obama is on the ballot, period. You cannot be slack in this vote. This is a most consequential election. It really is.
Pam, midterm elections, it's almost like a report card. You've seen the large elections, and when the midterms come about, it's sort of like a report card. Well, we voted for you, and it's been 2 years. And if you stay, that means you pass the test. You get an A. And if you don't, we'll vote you out. And in the 2022 midterm elections, Black voters will confront a new era of voter suppression that threatens our political power. So we have to protect Black ballots and the future of Black people and the future of the democracy. And as you know, and this is a fact across the country, that people of color are the ones who turn the tide on the outcomes. So we have to take our power and understand our power and join the movement and calling on everyone to join the fight to protect the Black ballot and to go in there and vote. Back to what Barbara Jordan says, where she says, by amendment and by all of these causes, I am a part of we the people. Okay, she said, I felt somebody for many years that George Washington and Alexander Hamilton just left me out by mistake. Well, through amendment, interpretation, court decision, we are we the people.
Yes, we are.
Okay, and so if we are not voting, then we have no, I'm going to use your term, you have no skin in the game if you don't cast your vote.
That's right. That's right.
So we have the right to be the inquisitors for the nation, to represent the democracy as we see it.
Right.
And it's wrong if we don't vote. And that's why Abdul's program protect black ballots is important. You got to be prepared when you go there because there's nothing that they can throw at you. I got a program, Give Me Five. I took 5 people in, and the lady says, "Are you at this address?" I said, "No." And I said, "I haven't been at that address in 30 years. Why is it showing up now?" And yeah, why is it showing up now? And so luckily I had all the documents. I had my impediment documents. I said, "Yeah, here's the lease from that time that I lived there. And here's a note from that person." And the lady was shocked that I had a 28-year-old lease. I had a whole notebook of stuff. I was walking in because I didn't know.
That's crazy. Why should you even have to have all of that stuff? That's crazy.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges, I write about it in my column, Big Mama Speaks, is that they voted against Jim Crow. They voted against lynching.
Mm-hmm.
We are out of this pandemic. We don't have any reason not to show up at the polls. If they move, they shut down the polls in my neighborhood, take a train to the other side. When we did the Birmingham boycott, churches had drive vans. We were everywhere. We planned a movement that moved people. And it was the women in the community that gathered in the church. And there was a deep discussion and plans on how we're going to get it done, how they're going to get past Jim Crow laws, poll taxes, and the actions of a supremacist group of people. And they did it. They decided they would drive. And they decided who would be taken to the polls and who would stay behind. So we don't have an excuse right now because we don't have a pandemic holding us back. We do have the rules, but we can bring all our armor, our full armor to the table.
Right. I got to share this message. Sherry Beasley, who was the first African-American woman to be on North Carolina's Supreme Court, Chief Justice on North Carolina Supreme Court, is running for senator for Congress here in North Carolina. And the guy she's running up against, oh my God, he's awful. He's just awful. I can't deal with him. At any rate, she lost her bid to be reelected on the Supreme Court of North Carolina by 401 votes.
Wow.
She lost by 401 votes. But guess what? When they did the statistics, they discovered that there was over 415,000 Black folks that were registered to vote, and they did not vote.
Didn't go. And that's my point about getting to the polls and Give Me Five.
Yeah.
You don't show up yourself. And my Give Me Five program, and you can share it with your audience, and I sent you the documents, but it clearly states what you got to do. It says identify a voting location. Identify the date and time you're going to vote. That's number one. Right. Number two, ask 5 of your allies to agree to go with you to vote collectively on that same date and time, so you show up. That's a power that young people and other people need to see. But at the same time, you set that date and that time for your 5 and to join you at the polls, but then you turn around and say, hey, number 3, have your 5 recruit 5 others. And if everybody in that 5 recruits 5 others, it magnifies that 250 votes is going to show up at one polling location at one time.
Right.
The 5th thing you do is arrive, vote, and watch. You need to set up a celebratory watch party to see what you've done and turn it into a social media phenomenon. You got to go out there and use the hashtag Give Me Five. One of the things will make you laugh, Pam, is I'm wondering why haven't we come up with an alternative to Twitter? If it's about to go crazy, we have the power to create an alternative tomorrow. We call it Twitter. I don't care. It could be created tomorrow. So we have power. And so we don't have to be, we're at a place where we are in a space where we don't have to have dependency on something that holds it over us anymore. A vote is one way, getting the vote. Stacey Abrams, let's look at her machine. In her own county, there were thousands of Blacks who registered to vote that didn't go. And if they had went, she'd be the governor already. But they stayed at home.
What are you staying at home for? There's no reason to stay at home. If you've registered, get your butt up and vote. It
Right.
takes you 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That's all. That's all it takes.
Right.
You know,
My big mama said, I will vote today because I can recall the voting days when I could not vote. And
eh,
for those votes, she said, today, I think Big Mama would say, we only have one drop off location in the county. No problem, lady. Let's grab the station wagon, our Bibles, and let's go. You know,
that's,
and her favorite line was, you have to make a way out of no way.
that's right.
And so it would be a piece of
Right.
cake. I can't imagine not voting.
I can't either. I
would
can't.
dis-
And
it
I'm
would
telling you, I'm
dishonor the
so,
memory. I can't imagine not voting. It was
we,
just the memory of my Big Mama. And I'm voting because it's my duty or responsibility of the members of powerful Black people who were hosed and assassinated.
yes.
They lost land. And
Yes.
those millions of men and women who don't have that 40 acres and a mule, I need
Right.
to, and we all need to get up there. Load up our vans. Don't just go by yourself. Take 5. Give me 5. And remember, we sung this song at the polls today when we did a drive over to the polls. Ain't
Mhm.
nothing gonna turn me around.
That's right. That's right. Well, my church, we did a big Souls to the Polls, and we had a huge caravan. And your frat brother, Mark Morial, was here from the National Urban League. And he gave a charge to those students. He talked about the age of Martin Luther King. He talked about the age of John Lewis and different ones that are on the dais of the March on Washington. And he said, nothing ever happened in this country without young people taking over. And that's one thing I can say about Generation Z, Gen Z. I think they're going to show up and show out. Now, we need to get the elders to show up and show out too. They're not, the Gen Z is more invigorated and more in tune to social consciousness than the millennials are, statistically speaking.
Right, I got that. But I think our challenge is that our Gen Zs and Gen Xers like to be in the game of visible indifference. I love that. The civil disobedience is great, and they're good at it.
Mhm.
We not only were civilly disobedient, but we changed the laws. We requested change the laws. And so here's my biggest argument about our people of color.
Mhm.
And this is something in my column, Big Mama. But the children of Emmett Till need to talk to the children of George Floyd. We're out there activating stuff, and we're not having a cross-generational conversation.
Mhm.
You know, when you have organizations that are pro advocacy for people of color, and they raise millions of dollars, it's not being spent or it's not making a change. When we used to raise $3,000 just to get enough cars to make sure that the bus system in Birmingham didn't make any money off us. So
Mhm.
we out of nowhere, and our young people are creating cancel culture. They're making people change the way the consumers and the manufacturers, corporations are trying to get in the game of equity. But,
Mhm.
but until you have a conversation with someone who's got skin in the game, you
Mhm.
don't know what to request. So
Mhm.
we have to talk to each other. We have to have that conversation, and it can't be older people talking at young people. It's
No,
talking with them,
with them. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
say, and I tell, and one of the elders asked me, well, how do you want me to talk to a young person? Well, when they tell you that then we need to protest, and you say instead of saying we've been there, we've done that before, and so here's what happened when I protested in 1963. How do you propose we do it this time? Get
Mhm.
engaged in the historical understanding of what we've done before, but at the same time, tell me how we're going to do it now and how would that work? Because then you have a unified conversation where you work out the kinks. You know, fear is not our problem when it comes to vote. It's the anxiety of most of the people I talk to says my vote don't count.
Right. And Edwin Presley says people don't vote because they are tired of the political games on both sides, Democrats or Republicans. But the fact of the matter is, you got to be in it to win it, one way or the other. There's no perfect party. There isn't one. But
Yeah, yeah,
one thing for sure, they have showed you that what they perfectly can do is take away your rights and your freedoms. And
right.
I don't want to live in an autocracy. I want to live in a democracy.
I Big Mama said, if the gravy on your plate don't fall on my plate, then your gravy ain't no good. All right. So the young folks and the old folks need to get together. Now, I have to admit that I'm speaking from a young mind, but I'm an old folks now. And I wouldn't have been able to accomplish the change in my community. I took 216 people with felons and made them into entrepreneurs, and not one went back to jail. But if I didn't have a conversation with them old people, yeah, I'm an OG now, but if I hadn't had the conversation and hadn't went out and got young people to teach me how to train these people and change their mindset, if I hadn't had a cross-generational tribe, I would be successful. And we need to be cross-generational at these polls. We need to make sure everybody's going. Don't go by yourself. It's no good. Go with 5 people. Take 5 and tell them to bring 5 and celebrate the fact that you did. Okay, and we've got to be able to be out there in the game. And thank you, Judy. I think we should go ahead and create a new alternative and call it Twitter. But yeah, we need to take over. Just take over.
We had some of our HBCUs march to the polls. North Carolina Central University did, and it was quite a display. They had the drum majors and everything. It was beautiful. The young men even dressed up in suits. It was the most beautiful thing. Beautiful.
And we are a visual culture. That's why I tell you, and give me 5. I said, celebrate. Let's show up in suits. Let's get dressed up. We love having those photo opportunities.
Yeah,
we do. How we said, do what it do. Make it do what it do. Let's make it do what it do. Get all dressed up and get ready to vote and get ready to celebrate that vote. And if we don't land where we're supposed to, let's vote again.
Yep. All right. Well, listen, Terry, thank you so much for coming on. Noemi had to leave early, and she stayed a little bit longer than I expected, but I'm so thankful for everybody coming tonight. Listen, vote in your best interest. Take people with you. Take 5, take 4, take your whole church, do something, but vote, guys. We have to vote. It's not enough to be registered if you don't actually do the action. Okay?
That's
all right.
Join me and Pam at the celebration party. I'm going to have one in Texas. She's going to have one in her city. Make sure you have a celebration party. Let's celebrate.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do something virtual or something. I'll do something. We'll do something. Yeah. All right, guys.
Pam. Thank you for this powerful.
Thank you, everybody. Good night, and we will see you next Sunday, if not before. Maybe I'll do something special on Election Day. All right. Good night, everyone. Wave them out, Terry.